It's time for some of the smartest plays that we've seen in the NBA this season, from brilliant passes to play reads and more. Let's start in Los Angeles, where the Lakers and Rockets were in a barn burner down the stretch, and Los Angeles decides to free Anthony Davis with a screen and hawk cut at the elbow so he can force a switch onto a smaller defender and post him up from there. Dillon Brooks actually denies this really well, and it's a turnover and miscommunication, but that sets up the same thing a minute later, where Austin Reeves sets the screen. Houston wants to avoid the switch, so Alperen Şengün stays with Davis, denies the post again, but this is all to set up a counter in a tie game with 90 seconds left. Davis is jogging up to the same position, Cam Reddish comes to set the screen, and Davis knows that Şengün doesn't want to switch, so he focuses on fighting through the pick. Meanwhile, Davis doesn't cut, but he turns and screens on the ball, and now Şengün is nowhere to be found. Jalen Green has to rotate over, the defense collapses, LeBron James can attack a closeout and put the Lakers ahead. And as a bonus, this might be a smart business decision for Jalen Green as he jumps out of the way of LeBron coming down the lane, although that's a red carpet and an easy one for LeBron, but it's all set up by this fake cut that is actually a screen for the ball, completely compromising the defense, and the Lakers get a huge score in a 1-point win. Screens are nice, but I love myself a good cut, and the Celtics have this out-of-bounds play to start the game against the Knicks, and Kristaps Porzingis goes to set a pick on Jaylen Brown, but it's actually a screen for Porzingis as Brown walks underneath and turns to set a screen on his man. Kristaps twirls and heads into the paint, and that just completely catches New York off guard and frees Porzingis for a catch right at the rim. Here's a similarly creative route that I really love from Toronto's Gary Trent Jr. He's on the wing here and knows Zach LaVine is zoning up him and the man in the corner. So he goes to set a little pin-in screen to free Boucher for the corner three, but LaVine sinks down thinking there's a cut coming, so Trent just improvises and goes right around him into that little pocket in the paint. Beautiful pass from Siakam, and that is how you do it. But there's nothing quite better than multiple cuts on a play, and we get that with some vintage Warriors basketball here. Steph Curry gives it up and then flares outside a Draymond Green screen, and as the ball's in the air, Draymond reads that both defenders are going to Curry. He cuts right to the basket. That triggers a corner cut from Gary Payton II as the ball's in the air, and the whole thing in real time is 2 seconds of gorgeous tic-tac-toe and a GP2 dunk. Of course, no one moves quite like Steph Curry without the basketball, and we've seen him run into defenders and use them as screens before, but earlier this year against Houston, he turned his own teammate Kevon Looney into a screen without Looney even knowing he was a screener, flares to the outside and drills a three. And Looney is just getting up after getting this loose ball and literally standing here at the elbow. And Curry sees that as an opportunity to use him as some kind of tree to run Fred VanVleet around, gets to the wing, and that is just incredible creativity from one of the all-time greats. In the past, we've seen someone like Trae Young use the backboard to pass it to one of his teammates, but Trae is a point guard. And in Oklahoma City, the 7-foot Chet Holmgren found himself in isolation against Ivica Zubac, attacked him, and then after the up fake, sent it to himself off the backboard for the dunk. And if we go back over 20 years, Tracy McGrady did this against the Toronto Raptors in transition, and McGrady threw the pass to himself so he could cut around his defender. That defender actually moved out of the way on the pass. And Chet's situation was equally creative because after he up fakes here, he can't dribble anymore and no one's in front of him. So instead of taking an uncontested 10-foot shot, he just throws it back to himself for the easy slam. That is unbelievable basketball instinct and execution from a 21-year-old rookie. And then as a bonus, we got an even crazier version from Anthony Edwards, where he's almost taking a jump shot from the top of the key. There are defenders in the paint, but he doesn't care and throws it to himself anyway. And my favorite part of this one is how both defenders in the paint go to box out like it's a shot, even though Ant is glass passing to himself. It wouldn't be a smartest plays without some of the best passes, and Nikola Jokic is the reigning king of that category. And we've seen Jokic pretend to shoot the ball and pass it instead, and this shot pass is an incredibly effective way of deceiving the defense and throwing them off. But I'm not sure I've ever seen one as good as this in-season tournament game against Dallas, where Jokic is posting up in the paint, turns to shoot what looks like a fadeaway, and somehow hits Aaron Gordon on a lob. And what's really ridiculous about this play is Jokic doesn't look at Gordon once he starts dribbling to his right here, feels the double team coming out of the corner of his eye, and when he turns, Josh Green thinks he's in position, but Jokic still throws it right to the perfect spot next to the rim. And that would be a difficult pass if he was staring right at it, but instead it's almost like a no-look shot put for the layup, which basically breaks my mind. Let's see if we can top that from another in-season tournament game that same night. Here's a Dario Saric missed three-pointer. Steph Curry and Gary Payton II are under the basket, rebounding here. The ball comes off to Curry in the air. He tip passes the rebound to Payton, which is absolutely ridiculous, but Luka Doncic might have beat them all on Christmas when the Suns were switching and then trapping Luka a bunch in the pick and roll. Here he hits Derek Lively on the lob. So a minute later, Doncic is looking for that same trap coverage. The Suns are worried about Lively on the lob, so Luka jumps in the air and has this man open at the top, but instead throws it right at Eric Gordon because he knows Gordon is going to vacate the spot, and that is just an insanely audacious next level read to free up the open shooter in the corner, where Luka is truly playing a step ahead of the defense. And finally, let's give some love to shot blockers. We don't think about them as making smart plays all the time, but to start this Hawks game, Victor Wembanyama is dropping back against the ball handler who looks like he's going to shoot, but Wemby knows it's more likely to be a pass from there, turns and makes an incredible save on the lob, and then tight ropes the sideline to keep it in bounds. So a minute later, Trae Young is thinking Wemby needs more than one fake, so when he comes around the screen, goes to a fake behind the back pass to set up what looks like a layup, but it's really a lob, but Wemby reads that too, and then he's so long he makes the save at the basket as an added bonus. But I really love this Gobert gambit against the Mavs. In a game where Luka Doncic was giving Minnesota fits to start, they brought Gobert out to the level of the screen in the third quarter as an adjustment. And Luka knows this, so it changes how he attacks, setting up this play in the third quarter where Doncic up fakes, moves around a Derek Lively screen, and because he knows Gobert's coming to the level, now he's thinking about Lively releasing into all this open space, but Gobert was the one really setting the trap, merely showing himself at the level of the screen to instantly play the roll pass. And there's a similar cat and mouse game going on against the Clippers here, where Gobert is in his conventional drop. Kawhi Leonard is a drop killer who loves taking these mid-range jumpers. So later in the half, when they're in the same situation, Kawhi remembers that Gobert is sort of conceding that mid-range shot, goes around the screen and gets inside the three-point line, gets comfortable, but again, falls into Rudy's trap, and he just smothers that with his incredible wingspan. And as much as size drives the impact of great shot blockers, guile and wit can also be a huge part of their success on defense. Basketball has become such a chess match over the years that sometimes even the most basic plays are filled with a ton of intellectual gambits and counters. This looks like a basic pitch and catch, but Al Horford had been guarding a wing, Terrence Mann, for the last few minutes, hoping to muck up the Clippers' pick-and-roll game by forcing them to screen with a guard who isn't much of a roll threat. So they mix it up by putting Horford back on Mason Plumlee, who asks Harden, "Should I come screen?" And Harden nods, "Yes, bring him up." But this is Boston's next trap, with Drew Holiday or Derek White ready to fly up to the ball screen and keep Horford near the hoop. Only that freezes Horford for a second, because if White goes to the screen, Horford needs to sit on the near block, shadowing man. But if Drew goes to the screen, Horford needs to switch to the far corner and take Paul George. White instantly sees the issue and points to George, ready to heroically rotate all the way there himself. But because Holiday is one step too close to the paint, Harden reads all this pre-switching and zips it just past Drew's arm for that open George 3. And the game is so fast that all those decisions took place in under 5 seconds. Whew. Today's ball handlers are so good at using screens that defenses come up with elaborate coverages to stop them. And so if you're guarding the ball, you want to slide up and get in position so you can get around the screen and hopefully slow down some of these offenses. And earlier in the year, we saw Tyrese Halliburton take advantage of that against the Bucks, calling for a screen late in the possession. His defender, Malik Beasley, is getting ready to go around the pick. The only thing is there's no screen there, so Beasley is left frozen in his tracks because Halliburton realizes he's waiting for that screen so he can just go early and blow right by him, and that causes the defense to collapse, and the Pacers end up getting some offense at the basket because of that. And Jalen Brunson actually took this to the next level against the Kings, where the Knicks were nursing a 3-point lead down the stretch, and you see him call for Josh Hart to come screen here. And when he does this, his defender, Keon Ellis, calls for the switch. It happens quickly, but he turns his head so he can get between Hart and the basket on that switch. A minute later, it's the exact same situation. The Knicks are running clock and Brunson is directing traffic. He calls for Hart again, and notice Ellis turn his head so he can see Hart coming and get that inside position on the switch. That helps the Kings defend the entire possession, and the whole thing leads to yet another empty possession for the Knicks in the clutch. So, after seeing how Ellis is playing this twice, Brunson comes down again, and when he calls for Hart to screen, Ellis turns his head and he just blows right by him, getting downhill and sealing the game with a floater. But the real brilliance here is Hart isn't even in position to set the screen, and he's actually a little confused about what to do. But Brunson picked up that Ellis was turning his head on this action, so by asking for that screen from the far side of the court, he's looking for him to turn his head so he can catch everyone off guard, goes early, and that subtle bit of trickery clinches the game for the Knicks. In part one, we talked about the brilliance of passing it to yourself off the backboard, which we saw multiple times already for a self-assist. But lately, players have been taking it to a new level, with Keontae George taking an alley-oop and sending it off the glass back to his teammate Colin Sexton, and you see George immediately say, "This was a pass," and he was credited with the assist on this quick mid-air thinking. And watch Colin Sexton call for the pass right back, and it's a creative use of that backboard pass. But Tyrese Halliburton took it to an even higher level against New York in February, coming down on the fast break here and using the self-pass from the three-point line just to kick it out to another teammate. And that is a serious assist, ladies and gentlemen. And my favorite part here is Miles Turner. Just his mind is blown watching this play unfold. And I'm not sure what's better here, the kick out or Tyrese getting the idea to jump pass it to himself from the three-point line just to get an assist for a teammate. Speaking of self-assists, we've seen players go off the back to themselves off an inbounds pass like this for decades. Scottie Pippen used to do it all the time in the 90s for the Bulls, but I've never seen anyone do it in the middle of a play until Josh Hart did that to Drew Holiday earlier this season, where Hart is stuck in the air on a three-point attempt, realizes at the last second he can just throw it off of Drew's back. It comes right back to him perfectly, and this time it's Jalen Brunson's mind who is blown on yet another high IQ self-pass. Luka Doncic has thrown some of the craftiest, smartest passes we've seen in the last few years. This one from the in-season tournament breaks my brain a little bit, and he always loves to throw lobs, even in early offense. So this creates a game within the game, where Devin Booker is sitting in help, ready to pounce on a lob to Derek Lively. Luka comes off the pick and sees this, so he looks to the corner to bait Booker, freeing up the lob over the top. And he busts out this sorcery with two defenders crowding him and the big man in great defensive position, but he throws it to only where Lively can get it. When he comes down the court against Boston, it's a similar situation, reading that baseline defender. So when Drew Holiday decides to help, it opens that lob, but that's what Drew wanted. Holiday knows to watch for the lob there from Doncic, and it's almost like he baits him into it. And think about how next level that is to outwit Luka on his own pet play. Tyrese Halliburton loves skip passes, where he shoots it to the far corner. And we've done a deep dive on how he likes leaving his feet and looking in different directions on passes like this. So against the Clippers, he blew by his defender to set up another no-look beauty, only Paul George is a step ahead. And George comes over here to help on the roll man, and even though Halliburton looks to the top, PG knows his tendencies and nearly snatches it cleanly, and that's just an elite understanding of both the situation and his opponent's tendencies. It wouldn't be as smart as plays without the wizardry of Nikola Jokic, who feels like he is experimenting out there sometimes, like this play against the Kings, where he steps over to take a charge, but he's actually baiting Trey Lyles into passing it and then sticking those quick hands out for the steal. And the quick hands are one thing here, but I don't remember a player ever coming over to fake a charge only to then jump out of the way and force a turnover like this. And that arguably wasn't even his best fake out like this. In the final seconds of a nail-biter against the Celtics, Aaron Gordon was on the free throw line clinging to a 2-point lead. Jokic faked going early to draw multiple Celtics into a lane violation. Now, this was actually called a double lane violation because Jokic's right foot crosses the line there. So this was actually a jump ball instead of a second free throw, but he knows the Celtics are trying to double team him on this block out and makes a huge move forward with the plan to stop and not go into the paint and induce a lane violation. And I am not sure I have ever seen that before, even if it didn't entirely work. What does work are Jokic's passes. And for someone who might be the best passer in NBA history, he threw a candidate for the best pass in NBA history in March against the Knicks. And to understand this pass, I think we have to go back to January when the Nuggets played the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. Jokic was posting up in a similar situation. The Knicks double off of Aaron Gordon on the baseline, meaning a perimeter defender has to slide down and take Gordon. So as Jokic sees this out of the corner of his eye, he turns to look for Aaron, but realizes that extra defender is coming down and hits another open teammate instead. So later in the quarter, in the same situation, the Knicks bring that same double from the baseline, but this time Jokic knows the help comes from the top. You see Josh Hart pointing to Jalen Brunson, so Joker throws it to Gordon's left hand where only he could get it, and that's an absolutely insane pass by itself. But that means the next time the Knicks put him in this situation in March, he knows the double is coming off of Gordon's man, and that a guard is going to come down and help, and he knows Gordon will look to get inside that smaller player. So without ever looking, he just throws it to that same inside hand spot, in one of the greatest passes I have absolutely ever seen. Playoffs are known for exciting moments and clutch shots. They're a pressure cooker that separates the wheat from the chaff while forging historical legacies. And they also bring out the smartest, most intelligent plays from players and coaches. The chess match of the second season comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's that convergence of physical gifts, all-out effort, and basketball IQ that separates typical plays and players from the best of the best.
Off the glass, missed it. Nembhard has it. Rick Carlisle says go. Nembhard drives into the paint, knocked away, stolen by Holiday.
Off the miss, Drew immediately picks up Nembhard, knowing there's 10 seconds left, takes an angle so he can cut him off in the front court, but he actually slips, then anticipates Nembhard driving to his strong hand, uses that bonkers hip technique while reaching with a backhand for the ball, and that play should probably be in Springfield with Drew's other playoff masterpieces. The gall of some of his plays, the anticipation, defines playoff basketball. He's reading the ball handler's eyes here, loads up when he picks up the dribble, then bats it right out of the air. Against Cleveland, he played mind games with Darius Garland, recovering into the play, then stunting toward Garland quickly, almost baiting him to pass it for the turnover. And the Celtics actually have two high IQ defensive guards, so when Holiday's faked out here, White saves the day, and watch where Derek comes from. He's guarding the corner shooter, creeps over to help on the roll man, and most defenders stop right here because the roll is covered. But he's reading the ball and comes all the way over to block it. As unreal as that is, that's not even my favorite White play of the playoffs. It's not even this amazing rear view block with the instant reaction time to track the ball and tip it to a teammate. Instead, it's this clutch play in Game 1 versus Indiana where he's defending a Tyrese Halliburton pick and roll, then suddenly materializes at the rim to save a dunk. And the first high IQ read here is White late switching back to the roller, but again, he doesn't stop there, tracking the ball the entire way to the basket. And when Miles Turner's about to pass, White's still behind the ball, but he's so quick to react that he peels all the way down to the lob. Unreal. Naz Reid had a similar play against Dallas, only he was defending the screener, turns to recover, and sees Rudy Gobert taking the roll man. So he just keeps going to play the lob, and this is so clean that Naz timed his jump with the pass, knowing that it was coming. Gobert's lob defense was actually a critical part of his impact against Denver, where he'd help toward Jokic, but when Nikola picked up his dribble, Rudy would play the lob to Aaron Gordon. This was critical down the stretch of Game 1, stunting briefly to Joker and then breaking up this lob pass, and then just generally choking off the basket area. And for the last few years, the basketball world has grown accustomed to Jokic catching it in the short roll, and when that baseline defender steps up, hitting Gordon on the alley-oop. This actually happened in the first half of Game 1 like clockwork, with Gobert stepping up and Aaron sneaking in behind him. But at the end of this game, Jokic rolled free, Gobert came to meet him, but that's a ploy to induce the lob, and he makes an incredible play to flick it out of the air and knock off the champs. In Game 1 of the next round, Gobert was on offense with a 2-point lead and a minute to play, and Luka Doncic stepped up to help, only that's right, he used the exact same technique to bait Conley into throwing a lob so he could retreat and break it up. The beauty of the playoffs is that the style makes the fight. So Gobert's roaming lob defense that slowed down Jokic was picked apart by Luka's interior game. Doncic waits as long as possible for Gobert to commit vertically, then drops it off for the dunk. Luka is the master of slowly carving his way into the paint, and if a defender doesn't commit, he'll score it himself. And in this series, he head faked Minnesota's defense into oblivion. On this one, he looked to the corner, Karl Anthony Towns was thinking closeout, and that freed the roll man for a dunk. And here Luka's out in transition, slows down to really sell this pass to the trailing shooter, then snaps it for another dunk. And Jaden McDaniels is on Lively, but that head fake unplugs his controller, and that's a grandmaster at work. He carves deep into the paint here and somehow squeezes it in for another lob, and Gobert is moving back and forth, playing the shot or the pass. When Luka gets Rudy to commit, he passes it, but even that little extra ball fake moves Naz Reid to the corner to free up Daniel Gafford. So even his subtle movements of the ball freak out defenders. He's driving in isolation, and again, it's like puppet strings open up a layup because Naz reacts to the corner when Luka moves the ball in that direction slightly, and then the Red Sea can part. And in this series, Gobert was now reacting to Luka's puppeteering. And remember, if he guesses right and helps stops the lob, Doncic still finds an open three-point shooter, and this time the Wolves dodge a bullet not once, but twice. But Doncic was off the charts manipulating Gobert in these situations. Rudy's retreating here, and the instant he commits to Luka, the lob is on its way, and it's another Derek Lively stuff. And he even punished Gobert leaning in the wrong direction in their vertical chess match. Rudy jabs toward Luka to bait the lob, but Doncic is a step ahead with the pass, and he delivers this thing high and away where only Gafford can reach it. Amazing. Luka even won their rock-paper-scissors battle when he lost. Gobert correctly contests his shot at the last minute, but oh no, that's not a shot, it's a backwards pass away from Gobert's arm and another alley-oop. And finally, in Game 5, the coup de grace from Luka was this Euro step lob over the top because Gobert sets an incredible gambit by playing the shot, only to fake playing the pass to come right back to the shot, and Luka's still ahead of all that. This is playoff basketball at its finest. Gambits and counters, subtle little high IQ plays that unlock a score that are difficult to catch in real time. Anthony Edwards calls for a clear out here so he has space to attack, and you may have noticed Edwards call for that clear out on the last play so he could set up his fadeaway without an extra defender. But it was harder to notice Kyle Anderson conducting this play on the backside, telling Towns to flare behind him so he could set a screen when the Mavs rotated to the corner, and brilliance like this just can't be captured in the box score. And finally, let's not forget the coaches that move the pieces in these back and forth chess matches during a series. Whether it's an incredible after timeout play like this one drawn up by Mark Daigneault to open the lane for a surprise cutter, or changing a matchup in a series like moving the bigger Aaron Nesmith onto Jalen Brunson to slow down the Knicks' offense. Remember the series before, the 76ers bothered Brunson with size, so it was a conceptual shift to move Brunson off ball more that started to free him up and create space for him to find a rhythm and counterpunch against that Philly defense. The Thunder slowed down Luka with an extreme strategy to shrink the floor and dare their role players to shoot. And that almost made the difference in a series where both teams scored the same number of points, while PJ Washington had just enough wrist strength to clinch it in Game 6. And of course, the Wolves knocked off the defending champion Nuggets by roaming Gobert off of Gordon and having Karl Anthony Towns glue himself to Jokic in the pick and roll game to force other Nuggets to make plays. This series also had some wild back and forth adjustments, with Gordon bringing the ball up to alleviate pressure, only for Minnesota to possibly overreact to that, freeing up offense for the Nuggets. And then the Wolves scrapped the entire idea in Game 6 and instead had Towns go way under a bunch of Jokic screens to avoid switching Gobert onto Joker, and sometimes daring shooters to shoot actually works. So, after 14 series filled with incredibly smart plays, reads, and adjustments, the 2024 NBA Finals await.
I was at a D2 school at Glenville State, and I carried around a clicker, and I would just click the possessions.
Wow.
And I started counting the possessions. We were playing against this team we were playing against this team, West Liberty. They dominated the margins of the game and they dominated the possessions of the game. It was almost impossible for them to lose because of the margin for error that they gave themselves by offensive rebound, not turning it over, getting to the free throw line, shooting the right shots, and then playing at the speed that they were playing at, forcing you to do the other things.
In the finals, the Celtics took care of the Mavs in 5 games. And while Boston obviously has a ton of talent in its starting lineup, this was also an analytical team of high IQ veterans that often outsmarted its opponents en route to the championship. On the surface, it epitomizes a mathematical advantage Boston created in this series. First, they kept Kristaps Porzingis out of the pick and roll by pre-switching Jason Tatum onto Dallas's center. And this switch kills Dallas's lob game because it shuts off the roll, and Luka can't easily get downhill into the paint. Remember, without a switch there, he can get a defender on his hip, carve into the lane, and throw lobs behind the defense. And he ran a pick and roll like this with one of his rim-running centers 26 times per game in the Western Conference Finals, averaging 1.25 points per play, according to Second Spectrum. But when the Celtics had Tatum guarding a center, they could just switch the pick and roll, removing Dallas's best play without giving up a mismatch that Luka could easily punish. And when he would bring Porzingis into the action, the screener was no longer a roll threat, so then the shots became much harder for the Mavs. When Porzingis was on a lob threat, the Celtics would pre-switch to avoid that pick and roll matchup, and then they could switch on the ball and take away any advantage that way. Or if they did get the matchup they wanted, Boston would slide over a third defender to make sure Porzingis could stay with that lob threat. Luka ran half as many pick and rolls with Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford in this series compared to the Western playoffs, and they were held to an incredible 0.68 points per play on those actions. So Boston's base defensive strategy, away Dallas's corner threes like this, is Boston's second mathematical angle, and they're happy to live with an above the break three. And one way to limit doesn't rotate to Derrick Jones Jr. here, and conceding that shot means they stay home on the other shooters. Additionally, instead of closing out to the wing and leaving a corner shooter, they'd close out just to take away the pass to the corner, and they were so good about leaving the right players open. Holiday sees PJ Washington here, but knows to recover to Kyrie Irving instead. And this is 3D chess because Dallas led the league in corner three-point attempts, and in the first 3 rounds, they increased their corner threes to 14% of all their shots. But the Celtics shrank that number to just 6%, which is similar to what they did to their Eastern Conference opponents. Boston is just so smart about reading the play and making the right decision. Brown is backdoored here, Al Horford sees it and instantly rotates to take away a layup, and look at how coordinated they all are. Kyrie gets by White, but Holiday sees it and steps up as White switches to the corner, so there's no advantage. And earlier in that game, it was Sam Hauser deflecting it, but when he was unable to win the race to the ball, Brown instantly took his man while switching with Hauser in this beautifully coordinated dance that isn't easy for offenses to crack. Peyton Pritchard ends up on Luka here. He has an entire side to attack. White sees that and spontaneously doubles, and there's no advantage and they have to reset. And their attention to detail shows up in scouting too, like staying down on Luka Doncic's up fakes to avoid fouling. Watch Tatum's technique here, waiting on a bunch of moves, then tracking the ball with his hand, then jumping instead of just lunging at Luka when he picks up his dribble. And as a result of this discipline, Doncic drew fewer fouls per possession than in any of his previous 8 playoff series. And just about every Celtic was cautious of this, but my favorite was a play we already saw, where White came over to help, stayed down on the fake so teammates could smother Luka, and this was actually an uncalled up and down violation because of White's discipline. They're even super smart when they foul, This is a transition run out at the end of the quarter, but White knows they're not in the bonus, and that stops the break. And when Pritchard ends up on a big man down in the post, he knows he can immediately foul on the floor when it's early in the quarter because they're not in the penalty yet. This is yet another small math edge on the margins that the Celtics play, like trying to foul intentionally when they're ahead by 6 so their opponent can't make 2 threes to tie the game.
Dominated the margins of the game, and they dominated the possessions of the game.
They also do really creative stuff offensively, like sticking a guard on the low block and spacing the big man to the perimeter so a smaller defender ends up protecting the rim. And we saw how coordinated and surgical their offense can be in their Game 3 halftime adjustment. The Mavs were roaming their shot blocker near the hoop in a kind of one-man zone in the first half. So Boston started the third by waiting for the shot blocker to roam to the strong side before instantly swinging it back to the weak side. That puts Dallas's defense in rotation, and they end up with a Holiday layup. This time, the Celtics attack from the opposite side. Everyone is spacing behind the arc. Holiday's in the corner. They wait for Gafford to roam over to the strong side, and again, quickly reverse it, but oh no, it's a Tatum layup. And watch how in sync the Celtics are attacking this. White tells Brown to lift up to set the screen. Horford's directing traffic. Tatum tells White to go to the top. White tells Tatum to take the corner position. Brown ends up with the inside seal on the screen. Lively has to then help, so Tatum thinks about the cut, but spotting up is actually better, and Brown's a little late with that pass, but it's another great shot. So everyone's on the same page with this counter strategy. Horford wants the ball to change sides, but Lively is already retreating, so Drew just feeds the post. Then Tatum waits to see where Lively goes, and he can spray it out, and Lively can't run faster than the ball. To finish this run, the Celtics go to an Iverson cut for White. Luka stays with it. So now they want to change sides and stretch out the big man. Tatum gets Lively switched onto him, and this time JT can drive and set up Brown for the corner 3. And the next time down, it's the same play, only White feels Luka automatically running to the other side, changes his route, and all of a sudden it's a 21-point lead. And White not only adjusted, but Horford spotted it and screened his own man to make that shot easier.
Walk baseline, like try to separate yourself or screen your own, stop short, because he's looking for the switch.
We've discussed this before, and the Celtics are masters of screening their own man in these situations because in addition to being talented, they also win on the margins.
Dominated the margins of the game, and they dominated the possessions of the game.
After their first loss of the series, they came back in Game 5 by having Drew Holiday slip his screens, which means Luka is expecting a switch. Kyrie never feels the screen, so he doesn't switch, and all of a sudden Drew is loose and it's a layup. And this adjustment led to a ton of confusion for Dallas defensively, and of course took advantage of Holiday's versatility and playmaking skills out of the short roll, and the result was another Celtics blowout and their 18th championship. So yeah, Boston was incredibly talented this year, but from Joe Mazzulla and his coaching staff all the way down to the bench players, they were an incredibly high IQ, strategically sharp basketball team, and that was on full display in the NBA Finals. You can get Thinking Basketball content in the NBA app throughout the season, and if you want more right now, check out the Thinking Basketball channel on YouTube.